Okay.
Day 2 of the conference, and people are a little bit more tired, clearly, but I want to thank Hershey and the ECAP crew for another great conference. Clearly, we're getting better at it as every single year that happens. I've gained another 7 pounds since I'm here. I have not done the spin class. I also want to thank Hershey for promising me that this is my last panel for a couple of years. And appreciate the break. Thank you. We'll try to leave.
You know you're not getting off that easy. So.
Yeah, we'll try to leave a few minutes for questions if we do have the time, but I just want to let everybody know in advance. J.J. Rabinowitz from the Ambassadors Group, who plays a vital role in all that we're doing to change the narrative, is here and available in the bubble in the corner of the room. If you have any questions, if you want to really get some knowledge and pearls of wisdom, he's available. So I want to start off by introducing our all-star cast. To my left here is Mr. David Hartman, who's the CEO of Symphony Post-Acute Network, sits with me on the executive team of the Ambassadors Group and plays a vital role into all the work we do for our industry, has a front row seat to all the pertinent conversations, and he's famously known as just being one of the nicer guys in the industry. So thanks, David. Thank you. You're logging 25 years, I think, right?
Almost there.
Mr. Clif Porter. Clif is the Senior Vice President of Government Affairs for AHCA, famously known for the Porter Rule of Relationships. If you don't have a political relationship if you don't have his or her cell phone number. He's been instrumental, really instrumental in all the work we do on the Hill, and he has a front row seat to all the political activity. Clif has more than 30 plus years. We'll leave it at that, right, Clif? 30 plus years in the industry. So thank you, Clif, for being here with us. And Mr. Harry Wilson, CEO of Genesis Healthcare. Harry is known as the turnaround guru for many different companies over the years, and most famously known to be one of 4 individuals on the Auto Task Force who successfully restructured General Motors and Chrysler. That's cool. He has been in the business now for almost, I think, about 60 days.
Just over.
Right?
It's my big anniversary.
And now has a front row seat to all the challenges facing our industry, responsible for one of the largest healthcare companies in the country. Harry, before I begin, I just want to make sure, with everything that you've seen over the last 60 days, you sure you want to?
I was just going to mention that. I have to leave.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
I'm excited to be here. Learn from you guys.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I'm Mark Berger, a CEO and founder of Villa Healthcare. About 25 years plus in the industry, we'll leave it at that, and famously known for saying, Hershey, this is my last panel. So let me try to frame the conversation. We sat up here what feels like probably a decade ago, last February, and one of our panelists, the esteemed Mr. Bob Hartman, who's here with us, made a comment, and I quote, "Shame on the operator who is not involved in political advocacy and isn't taking responsible role as a member of our industry. It's going to come back to bite us." He wanted to say that in his over 40 years, he has seen all the news cycles and read the "it won't happen to me" us stories many times, and can guarantee it's probably coming. Well, little did we know or realize how much it was coming, right? COVID has forced us as an industry to come together, work extremely hard, and overcome some very unique challenges. And the Ambassador Group was created from the onset to educate and support all the mid-level regional operators in the area of political advocacy, as well as having us play a bigger role in the front lines within the states that we operate in. Our goal was to build champions on the Hill and at the state capitals. And while this may take a number of years, it was something we all realized it needed to happen, and we need to get involved and do this. While we've been successful on many different fronts over the past year or two, you look back and you say, how much more could we have accomplished, and how many more adversaries could we possibly have thwarted? The name of the session is Changing the Narrative. While COVID is expected to bring us some pain over the next couple of years, hearings on the Hill, onslaught of cover our ass, survey deficiencies, blame game, and media stories, we had our challenges from the get-go. And so, Clif, I want to open up with you. You're on the Hill all the time. Do we have a narrative issue? And does that need to be changed even prior to COVID?
Yes, we have a narrative issue. I think the narrative's changing, and I think in large part it has a lot to do with what this community's doing with the ambassadors group. And the one thing I must say, spending time here is I've really learned how much of a community it really is, and that's a natural platform for helping to change the narrative. Because again, if you can coordinate communication, and again, bring members of Congress to see what we do. And to me, that's been the biggest challenge in absolutely changing the narrative. We've not been able to bridge that connection.
Well, Clif, we've seen media. I mean, we obviously read the stories. We know the challenges, but specifically from the politicians that you meet with and talk to. When you say nursing home to them, what is that narrative? What do you think they think at a 30-second?
Yeah, I mean, again, I would say it varies. I think it's a generational perception. So if you're looking at it from somebody my parents' age, they've got a very different perception than the 25-year-old aide. But I will say this, that which most of Congress people that are making decisions, mind you, are under 30. So just keep that in your brain. They have a generational perception of what long-term care is. And so I think, again, we have to bridge that gap and get them to understand that this isn't your granddad's nursing home.
Got it. David, obviously, as we said, being involved in the ambassadors group, it's a mobilizing force. Do you believe we can change the narrative and begin to build those relationships? Is that something doable?
100%. I'll tell you the truth. Over the last year with COVID, it gave an opportunity for us, at least for me, to kind of go out and start to really reach out to those legislators that I didn't necessarily have relationships with. And like Clif said, they really don't know much about long-term care. They really don't know much about the SNF industry. What they do know is only about the negative and the narrative that's continuously said over to them from advocacy groups that are out there. And through the ambassadors group, through AHCA, through many different ways, we've been able to get information from ambassadors group, AHCA, and bring it to the table to present to our legislators. And the way you're going to be able to do that is we have to, you said the right word, mobilize. We have to be able to get our staff in front of these individuals. We have to get our teams to show what they're really capable of doing in front of these individuals. And that's how you're going to start slowly changing the narrative, because if you can create relationships with those legislators who unfortunately have an old stereotype of what a skilled nursing facility is, that's how we're going to make this really happen.
So we talk about building relationships, right? Which is something that we need to do. Clearly, from a political perspective, as you said, if there's one mindset that they have, it's breaking that mindset and being able to educate them. Harry, as I mentioned in the intro, you've seen an industry that needed to change its narrative, right? And having fresh perspective and looking at the things that you see, whether it's Genesis, whether it's the industry as a whole, right? Are there comparisons, areas that you can compare and contrast to?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, it's great to meet everybody. I've gotten, over the last 60 days, a trial by fire appreciation for some of the issues that many in this room have been dealing with for a long time. And this issue around changing the narrative and baggage in the eyes of some, unfairly earned baggage, is something that was certainly front and center for the auto industry. Obviously, the term used car dealer is actually a punchline. So the industry has had a lot of baggage over a long period of time. If you flash back to the financial crisis, you had the widespread and accurate perception that these were lumbering giants that were really poorly run and had mediocre quality, which was largely true. People on the left hated the auto companies because they made 100%, more than 100% of their profits through gas-guzzling SUVs, which they thought were evil. And the people on the right hated them because they thought they were better with the UAW. And so you had literally, outside the state of Michigan, no political support for the big auto companies. And what we had to do was basically change the narrative. It did help that TARP was in place, but maybe it's PRF is the equivalent. And what we really focused on was listening, understanding the concerns of people on both sides of the aisle, and really trying to run to problems and changing that narrative and providing a path to fixing those problems. We talked a little bit about the gas guzzling issue, so electrification. So GM is second in the world to Tesla in electrification. because of the investments that were made in 2009. So that was a key part of building broader support, but it also was the right commercial decision because that's where the industry is going and has been going.
So you make some valid points here. The question, I guess, that I would ask the panel here is, auto industry has its pros and cons, and I'm sure like every industry, when you're in it, you say the other industry is a lot easier. But this is an industry where I refer to it as every year worked in it is a dog year, and ultimately takes a toll. But we're dealing with human beings. I mean, we were in a meeting with one of the lobbyist groups in Washington for AHCA, and the comment that he made was, well, we're not really selling ice cream cones, right? We're taking care of people. Does that mean that we've got a bigger problem than just figuring out our customer base and how to change the narrative, or is it something that we have to deal with? Do we do we have a strategy, or do we need to pivot from our strategy?
Look, if I don't mind me jumping in, when you talk to legislators, like you said, we're not selling ice cream cones, we're taking care of lives, right? And by and large, we're doing an incredible job taking care of those lives. By and large, our majority of our facilities that are out there are doing amazing things. We use the word nursing home all the time, but it has such a negative connotation. We have to stop using the name nursing home. We really do. And we have to start thinking about it in terms of skilled nursing facilities, post-acute care, long-term care. And just that change alone, I think, will change the mindset of who we're talking to across the table. Because when you present yourself as a nursing home, unfortunately, the stereotype is the older generation that has that stereotype of people in wheelchairs dying, okay? And that's not what we do. We are incredibly sophisticated models. We are, and we're incredibly sophisticated clinical organizations at this point that provide incredible care across the country. But yet, all they think about are the negative stories they hear in the paper.
So perfect segue to, obviously we're spending a ton of time on creating strategy and talking about how we build those relationships today before we get the final blueprints and drafts and excitement that we're really working on, practically speaking, for the operators that are out there. How do they build those relationships, and what are the talking points?
Yeah, I would just quickly say, part of our challenge really from a narrative perspective is that we have a diffuse industry. We are a community-based industry. And due to the diffusion of our industry, unlike the automobile industry to some degree, you've got a product that you can standardize and sell from a quality perspective. As you all know, and we struggle with this everywhere. I mean, investment in our sector varies state by state. You can go to Oregon and you have a very, very highly invested Medicaid program, and you have a very, very different looking product. You can go to another state that does not invest, and you have a different challenge. So there's this issue of diffusion that we have to deal with. But I think at the end of the day, again, to me, it really does boil down to how much a part of your community is your facility. One, is it a performance metric? When I was operating buildings, I made it a performance metric. How often, I want to know that, you've got your member of Congress in your facility twice a year. I want to see it. I want to know when it is. I want it on a calendar. I want us to talk about what we're going to talk about. And again, like anything, look, I love my cousin, just using an analogy. My cousin's in trouble. He's still my cousin. And as much as I might have a problem with what he did, I'm going to close ranks around my cousin because it's my cousin. Same way applies to nursing home. Same way applies, like your point about Michigan. Michigan's going to lock down Republican or Democrat over the auto industry. It doesn't matter. These are our people. We have to do the same thing in our individual communities. If we do that, I think we can be successful.
I love that. That's a great point, and I'm coming to you in a second. I mean, many operators have come over to me, okay, so how do we get involved, right? How do we get involved? And clearly, JJ is out there, and we're building the team, and there's so many points of contact that he's making. But I think the reality is, Harry, you probably have to do this back in the day, and you're going to have to be doing this for a couple of years to come now, is building those relationships beyond influencing and changing the tone, on the Hill, but every community has its list of politicians, and do we do a good enough job? You know, David, you were going to say
No,
something?
all I was going to say was, practically though, you asked the question, practically, how do I get, we have associations in every single state, thank God. We have the ambassadors group. We have relationships at this point, or our peers who may have those relationships already with other legislators. Reach out to them. Find out who those, find out how to get in touch with them. Make a connection through another peer. But again, it's got to be a relationship that's created from a personal perspective, not just a letter that's sent to them or just an email. You have to talk to them face to face, and you have to figure out a way and get aggressive about it to get in front of them, to talk to them, or like you said, Cliff, get them into your building. Let them see what's really going on the ground level.
And I imagine the first time you do meet with a politician, it's not, hey, you need to help me with surveys, or you need to give me more money, or you actually build a relationship.
It's not only that. Most of the legislators have never talked to a skilled nursing operator.
Or been in a nursing home.
Or been in a nursing home. Or been in a skilled nursing facility.
Yeah, I was going to say real quickly, to your point, about having an existing relationship. Thank God we did.
Right.
You look at what happened last year. Thank God we did. Thank God we made the investments that we made. Because let me tell you, we use a term in my world, there's a time to break the glass. There's a time to talk, nice to see you at the fundraiser, what can I do for you? There's another time when you break the glass and you say, hello, I need to talk, you get on your cell phone, I need to talk to you now. And thank God we had the relationships to have that conversation and get allies to provide us the support that we need. If you think about it, I don't know what the latest count is as it relates to aid, but it's, when you look at state, federal, it's upwards of $25 billion in total. That ain't bad.
Significant.
Yeah, it is. It's
Yeah.
significant. The country made a statement last year, and that was, we're worthy to save. Now, the question really becomes, what are we going to do with that from here?
Well, on that note, Harry, there's more than just the strategy of building relationship. Obviously, it's extremely important and something that we talk about all the time. But again, from your perspective and coming into this without kind of the history, okay, what are some of the other practical ideas as you see them beyond just building relationships?
Yeah.
As changing to change that narrative and start building positivity and proactively creating momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'd make 2 points. The first is, kind of picking up on David's earlier point about language. So my favorite example on the importance of language in politics is a very simple example: death tax versus estate tax. Most people support an estate tax. No one supports a death tax. That language change in '94 fundamentally changed the dynamics on that one issue that matters to a lot of us. And so same thing on skilled nursing versus nursing home. Maybe there's even better language to be had. But I think language matters, and reinforcing that language over and over. But then I think the other thing, and thinking about preparing for this panel, an example that I've seen work very well in another different field is really personalizing the story. And an example of that is bringing politicians into the facility to see the work that's being done. But as an example, those of you in the New York City area are probably familiar with the New York City Charter School movement, which is a fantastic movement. It's nonprofit. It's a bunch of billionaires and centimillionaires trying to give inner city kids a better education. What could be better than that? And they had, despite enormous political muscle on both sides of the aisle, they actually had very little traction for years because of the offsetting power of the teachers' unions. And what they ended up doing was they mobilized the families. So these families, it was their kids in the schools or their kids who were denied a spot in the schools because of the lottery system that was capped by effectively the teachers' unions. And they mobilized 50,000 people in a grassroots campaign. It wasn't that hard. And those people went up to Albany and personalized it, and it was their face, their voice. They're incredibly passionate because it's about their kids, and nothing more important to them in the world. And we could do that, and maybe we're already doing that, and I'm just not been around long enough, but we could do that in terms of really personalizing and putting a personal face on the lives we touch and the people we serve and help.
That's great perspective. And one of the things we talked about at the board meeting yesterday for the ambassadors group was, how to create positivity, right? And clearly, I'll use the example of, I'll plug a product now, it's not my product, Strive 360, which is created specifically to combat all the negativity, right? If somebody's upset, you go somewhere, you immediately want to go and take it out on somebody. But when there's something that's positive that happens, how often does somebody really take the time to go and do that? And so the thought process that we talked about was, Does the industry as a whole start shining the light on other areas, right? We went through a tough year. Can we all pack a stadium with 25, 35,000 of our employees and actually bring the politicians, bring the media to support the concept of heroes, right? Can we create memorial services where the industry starts becoming sensitive, passionate, understanding to what we have here? Are there other things like that we need to think about, and can those things happen?
One of the things that we've been working on in Illinois is a family advocacy group. I was sitting, talking with a senator who basically said to me, you don't understand, the only people who come to my office and talk about nursing homes or skilled nursing facilities, and they say nursing homes, right, is those individuals who have had an issue. Those individuals have a problem, or a trial attorney comes and sits down with a family member and does exactly what you just said. They bring that personal touch to the table. He says, we don't do enough of that. We don't have the families that are sitting there with us, sitting at the table and having the conversation. And there are a lot of really happy families. There are a lot of families whose lives we've touched in a way that they couldn't thank us enough. We all have that. And we need to present those moments and those situations on a more regular basis with our state legislators and within our communities. And your ideas are great ideas. Doing a stadium packed with all staff, we can get that together. We should be doing things like that. But it takes collaboration amongst all the different individuals as well. And I think that's one of the other things that's changed over the years, is that there may have been silos in terms of different organizations over the years, and nobody really wanted to talk to each other about what they were doing, whether it was competitive advantage or secrecy in terms of what they were doing. That's all broken down.
Especially since Mish Blonder got on the
chat.
chat.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's no question that if you need to know something, he'll make sure you know it.
Exactly. What's your phone number? No, okay.
And if you don't know, it'll get out to you. But there is. I mean, the ambassadors group has created more of a unified approach and support.
It's camaraderie, and it's not just camaraderie amongst it, which we should have. We should be working together to support each other, to make sure that we're doing the right things, and that everybody knows about the things that we're doing out there. And we haven't done that enough in the past, and we're starting to see that groundswell, and we're seeing it, that mobilization of the group coming together. And if we can continue to do that, we'll have a better outcome for the industry.
So, clearly COVID has challenged us in ways that are unique, but like we said, there are challenges before COVID. I think COVID has exacerbated some of those challenges. When you look today from an operator's perspective and all the calls that we take and the conversations that we have, right? What is the number one challenge in your view to changing the narrative or helping us change the narrative? Clif?
Yeah, I'd say, there are a variety of challenges around the narrative, but I think, again, we've got the one. Yeah, I'm thinking of the one. I think we have to do a better job at defining what quality is, okay? Quality is a nebulous term. And quality to Harry is different than quality to me. All of us have a different perception of what quality is. We've got to normalize what that definition is and what it means. And I think if we can do that effectively, and a lot of it, is fundamentally, I've been in business, as you said, for 32 years. The main thing of being a successful operator, and I think it's still the case today, I'd argue it, is the ability to get from behind your desk and walk around your facility and know what the heck is going on and be proactive in solving problems.
I love that point, but Clif, the reality is that we're evaluated by a system that in a lot of our view is compromised. It's subjective, right? The 5-star system is kind of how we evaluate ourselves. You're there every day, right? Is that something that's a reality? Because the fact is, I did some data crunching, and for those that are operators in the state of Michigan, for example, and I use this as an example, and I know, Clif, you've gotten some calls, but I'll just tell you, make a data point. Over the last 3 survey cycles, the state of New Jersey has issued 79 actual harm tags or higher, 79, right? In the state of Michigan, it was 1,180.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Wow.
Right, so, one of the things we talked about actually before we got on this panel, Harry, was, do we have an independent body that evaluates us? I mean, you look at all the other industries, including the hospitals. Is that an idea that we need to push?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and there are different ways to do it. But you think about it, most industries do have that, right? It's not NHTSA that rates the auto companies; it's J.D. Power, as an example, right? It's Consumer Reports and other areas, and so the fact that the primary guide is created by a government body that has mixed incentives and narrow-minded in a lot of respects is a challenge. And so if you were to create one, it would be a significant undertaking. But you could create a kind of industry-funded example. It would have to be obviously bend over backwards to make it look objective and fair, and agree on standards. And you have to minimize influence, maybe long-term funding commitments or something like that. But I think it could really focus on the things that really matter to patients and residents, as opposed to something that's driven by a lot of arbitrary decision making.
You could be a great operator and have a bad survey, or a surveyor that's having a bad day. Yes. And there goes your reputation. It happens too quick. Yeah. Harry, when you see the industry outside, Clif made the point in quality. What is that challenge that you see as being the obstacle in changing the narrative, or playing the same role in it?
Yeah, I think, can I say two? I'll say rather than I'll cheat a little bit. One is, I think, bad operators and bad things, like, bad outcomes, bad events have disproportionate attention, right? And it's just the nature of media, and will always be the case, I believe. And so that's for every 1,000 good deeds, one bad deed gets a lot more attention. So I think that's hugely important, minimizing that.
Great point.
And maybe some self-policing along the lines of what we're talking about. The second thing is a little bit different, which is staffing, which I think will become, it's certainly a problem for us. I think it's a problem for many people here. I think it will become more pronounced because the economy is still heating up, even as robust as it is, with $6 trillion of federal stimulus coming our way. So that, and the minimum wage pressures in many states, in many industries, distribution centers are paying $12 an hour, now paying 20. People, so you see the ripple effect. And so I think the staffing will become more pronounced. And the question, of course, we need the skills and the talent of our people to do well. And so thinking through kind of workforce training, which there are a bunch of interesting novel things happening in other sectors, other industries. Truck driving, for example, we restructured the biggest trucking company in the country a few years ago. They have a labor shortage, different skill set, but still driving a 18-wheeler or double wide is hard. And so you need skills. And so that workforce training elements, I think, can be a really kind of common cause for the industry.
So survey reform quality, obviously, is a big topic. Like you just said, staffing. I think if you ask every operator in here, it's 800-pound gorilla. It's David, are you seeing any other areas beyond those?
He said it. It's unfortunately we have every once in a while a bad operator that comes in the industry and ends up doing something that ends up coming out in the papers and ends up all over the place, and takes all the rest of the operators who are really doing the right thing and trying to work really, really hard, puts them in a light that doesn't shine well in our entire industry. And again, if we continue to build those champions, and if we continue to go out and create relationships like Clif had mentioned, your cousin's not going to beat you up. And if he knows what's going on, he hears something that's going on in the industry that he sees in the paper or on the news somewhere else, he'll pick up the phone and call you and say, what's really going on? And that's really what has to happen.
I think it's important for everybody to know, and we talk about this as well, right? You can own 1 facility, 2 facilities, 5 facilities, or 100 facilities. You're part of the industry. You're going to get impacted by everybody else, and ultimately the ability to have a support group, whether it's AHCA, the ambassadors group, to really understand how to positively impact the industry so that there is a ripple effect is important. I'll go to this question. Looking back at COVID, does it hurt our industry or does it help our industry as we go through this over the next year?
Jump in. Look, no question that there's certain things that are going to be out there that are never going to go away. Certain realities of what had happened here that are painful and are going to stick with us as an industry. But the reality is we take it and we find the not the silver linings, but show the incredible things that happened. Like you keep saying, the heroes and what they did and how they became the families for these residents, and we can go on and on and on and on because we're all operators, we've all seen it, and really present those pieces. We'll be able to come through this as those individuals who took care of more people during COVID and were the safest places during COVID. And we keep seeing that narrative continue to start coming out along the way, where there was a beginning of COVID was terrible. But once we figured it out, and we all figured it out, we did incredible things. And that's the conversation that has to be keep talking about. And if I think that we will come out at the end of the day showing those opportunities and showing what we did.
So there's clearly a silver lining, as you may say, right? So
Yeah.
it's painful, we're challenged, census is down, but there are some things. How would you look at it from a silver lining perspective, Harry?
Yeah, I think it's, in every crisis there's an opportunity, right? It's that old expression, and we have to seize it though, because otherwise it can slip away. And I think that's really, I think everything that David just said in terms of kind of spotlighting heroes and the success stories that were in a really obviously awful time, but also kind of using that as a kind of pivot point to say, hey, this is how the industry should be defined going forward and supported going forward, including, preparing for a possible future pandemic, right? Things like that, but also much broader than that, right? Because the COVID period highlighted some inequities and some challenges, the state-by-state variation, for example, that had been in place a long time, but it took a, massive tidal wave of problems to really reveal it in front and center.
Clif, you're on the Hill. I mean, what do you see as the silver lining?
Well, I think the main silver lining.
Or is there one?
Yeah, there is one. I mean, I fundamentally believe there is one. I mean, we were the center of the healthcare universe for a year. And unfortunately, COVID laid bare a lot of the issues and affirmed what we had been saying for years. So what transpired essentially was almost, I hate to call it fulfillment of prophecy, but we've been saying all along, we've got a fragile system. We've got workforce. You kind of walk through all of these issues, and then COVID happens, and it essentially beats your already tattered house. So believe it or not, I think there's been some element of credibility and validation that's occurred in the midst of this crisis. And obviously, we have to just continue to, and that's really one of the things we're doing with our reform proposal, is trying to get ahead of it, being proactive, and essentially saying, okay, this has happened, putting it in everybody's face and saying, what are we going to do differently? What are we going to do differently, policymakers? And we're pushing that every day. That's what I'm doing right now, every day. Right in their face, here's some ideas.
And if I can add to that, one of the things that has come out of this is that they want to hear from skilled nursing operators. Where in the past they may not have wanted to take a meeting and want to have a conversation. They want to hear because their constituents are calling them, asking them what's going on down the street.
Right, so it can't be
if you
want to hear or have to hear.
whatever it is,
point,
but
right?
look at it, if you look at it in a way that says, hey, here's the opportunity, and how are we going to come out of this on the other end of it? Well, guess what? They want to hear what we have to say, and if you take that opportunity to go out and talk to them, they will listen, and they will listen to the good that you're doing also.
I think I was
and
talking
want to hear those
I was
pieces.
talking to one of the other operators, and we reminded ourselves at the beginning of COVID, we were all kind of deer in headlights and scrambling, and the conversation was either we're done, and the industry is done, or we're going to find out that the industry is actually more needed and stronger than we thought in the first place. And I think that really is something to take from it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and one example of what you just said, a key point that a lot of people have missed. If you recall, President Biden came out with a concept of saying, I'm going to invest $400 billion in home and community-based services. Y'all remember that, right? Okay. I love home and community-based services, but I felt a little left out, to be honest. And we made sure that message was clear. And we went to the White House, and we met with folks at the White House and essentially said, is that what you meant? Because you've got an entire decimated system that has explosive demand. And 3 weeks later, the president came out was saying, I'm investing $400 billion in long-term services and supports. A very small nuance, but again, a victory. And that's the kind of stuff we have to do.
Well, in your profession, a few words, a very small nuance.
Words matter.
Has huge implications.
Words matter.
Clif, PRF, like we talked about, is limited to what is left. I think the hope is that we get one more crack at it, but I think the reality is that after this crack at it, there is not going to be anything left in the tank from the Fed. Do you foresee or any talks around a government buyback program that's a reality when it comes to buying back beds? And does the infrastructure bill that you just mentioned have the capacity to help in really any practical from any practical perspective as you see it today?
Yeah, first question, 0 chance. Okay, so I'm blunt. I just find it to be, it's refreshing, but it's also important. You know, we don't have the bandwidth to waste our
And we
time.
cut through the chase.
Yeah, so cut right to the chase. No,
Yeah.
buyback's not happening. Forget it. Move it off the table. Get it out your mind. Moving on to $400 billion investment, the answer is yes. A significant amount of opportunity. And the real question is, how do we leverage that opportunity, and how do we continue to tell our story? In our world, the first thing you do is you get the money, get a number, right? So 400 billion is the number, okay? Once you secure, and the number's not been secured, so let's just be clear about that. That's the president's ideas. That's meaningless, and I don't mean to be blunt, but it is. I mean, it's meaningful from a messaging perspective, but as a practical matter, it's an idea. How do we shepherd that $400 billion to stay in the infrastructure package? Mission 1. And then 2, once it stays and if it's passed, ensuring that our interests are represented and that we basically get our share of what we need to modernize this sector to prepare for the hundreds, the thousands upon thousands of folks that are going to need us. To me, it's a fairly simple story. It's an infrastructure story. I lived in Toledo, Ohio for a lot of years. In Toledo, Ohio, one thing I loved was traffic was great. Why? Because the town was built for 200,000 more people. So I had 15 different ways to get to work. You flip that and you go to another community like Austin, Texas, and you're backed up and you can't go anywhere because it's built for 200,000. You know, what are we going to do to build the highway for tomorrow to deal with it? And I think this is a great opportunity to do it. I really do.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Okay. Let's go a little rapid fire. Questions for each of you, and then we'll go to the group. David, bullish or bearish on acquisitions, specifically only during the next 12 months?
Oh, 12 months, right? Yeah.
Only the next 12 months.
Bullish, but there are those who still believe that the values are way high. And we got to see we got a bit of change there, but I truly believe the industry is moving forward. And I think that it's the right time is coming up in the next 6 to 8 months.
Harry, bullish or bearish on bottom lines improving within the next 6 to 12 months?
I'd still say bullish. I think modest improvements in census, and I think kind of it's building on the challenges offset by staffing pressures, but still bullish.
Clif, bullish or bearish on survey reform during this presidency?
Bearish. Come on. You know, look.
This is rapid fire.
Yeah, bearish. Well, no, hey, look, look here.
You can go out in 30 minutes. I mean, what do you expect?
I admit it. I'm a nursing home administrator. You started talking about survey stuff, and I'm like, you know, and all these guys are like, and I see you doing it. It's like, and you know, we got to be truthful. I mean, this is a Democrat administration that believes in regulation. It's a Democrat Congress. We got to accept reality. We got to also tell our story and prepare for tomorrow. So now, no, but how do we create the narrative for when things changes, we can make progress? That's what we have to do.
That's great. Dave, I'll start with you and we'll go through the group. Biggest opportunity you see for the industry that happens within the next 12 months?
Biggest opportunity. Wow. I think for us, it's being able to come together as a group. I think, once again, because we've all been collectively through an incredible challenge, it's like when family goes through some challenge, they come together, right? And I think we as an industry have the ability to come together now, and we're seeing it, and I said it earlier, but we gotta continue doing it. We gotta continue, what do you want to say?
No, so you see changing the narrative is actually the opportunity?
100%.
Okay.
It's not just change, it's how we're going to change the narrative. You and I can talk all day long and we can make conversations with different people, but a larger group of people, 1,000 voices, as opposed to one voice in every single state who's the association that comes and talks at different centers, but 15, 20 different people come and talk, it's a different conversation.
Harry, when you see it differently, what's the opportunity specifically from an operational perspective or from a philosophical one?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with David. I think that's exactly right. And I'll add one thing, which is a longer time frame, but I think feeds into that, which is addressing discontinuities of care. And you can think about it from a consumer standpoint, you can think about it from a payer perspective, you think about it from a provider perspective, but there's just still too much fragmentation versus any other industry you can think of that deals with human capital, education, education, healthcare, et cetera. There's just too much of a discontinuity of care in the elder care market. And it obviously varies region by region, company by company. But I think that's over the long term a huge opportunity for both operators and for changing the narrative to be able to address that.
Cliff, you have something specific that we can grab as an opportunity?
Yeah, state support and aid right now.
That's a good one.
We just need to, awaken to that. We talk a lot about federal support. You start this discussion with where are the resources? And the federal government sent $350 billion to the states. $350 billion to the states in an economy that's hot.
Yep.
So do they need the money? No. So they have to spend the money, and there are deadlines on when they spend this money. Capital by capital, state capital by state capital. What are we doing? It's there. We just need to go, and we need to make our case. So it's a federal case, yes, on one hand, but we cannot lose sight of the state-by-state case.
Great point. Again, quickly, threat. We talked about a few of them. If there's one, David, that you're looking at, what's that one threat that you're dealing with, that you're going to be busy with?
That I'm going to be busy with. Staffing. Staffing's the biggest threat.
Harry?
Staffing.
Cliff, I think it now becomes staffing.
No question. No question.
Right?
No doubt. I completely agree.
Okay. Another quick question. Do we achieve same census from prior to COVID within the next 12 months? What are your thoughts, Dave?
It's going to be state by state. I truly believe that. I think that there are some states that are going to come back strong, and some markets that they're going to be slow because of the narrative that's out there right now. And I think that as long as that narrative continues to change, we will see it pick up.
So I guess what I'll interpret is from the bigger perspective, it's not rebounding because of those states, right? Harry, what are your thoughts?
I'd love to be wrong, but I'd say longer than 12 months to get back to pre.
You said what?
I said I'd love to be wrong, but I think it's going to take longer than 12 months to get back to pre-COVID levels.
Cliff, what's the data telling us?
Slow and bumpy. Slow and bumpy. At the end of the day, you think about it, Medicaid is your base and your foundation. That's been decimated. Short-term stays come and go. So it's going to do this.
Cliff, I'm trying to get some bit of optimism here. Does the 3-day Medicare requirement go away eventually?
Wow. No, yes. Well, let me say this, so I'll give you some good news. I think all of the waivers are in play. We're surely advocating for that. And I think there is a genuine openness now that we have data to show. We've been talking about the nonsensical nature of that rule that's been in place since before I was born, 1965. So how can a healthcare rule that was built in 1965 still apply today? It's ridiculous. So now we're in a position to have data to make that case. So I do feel like we have a real opportunity on that front. I think we got an opportunity on a variety of fronts with the waivers we've received to make some of those permanent.
Awesome. Dave, final words before we close out?
Final words.
Comments?
I want to give another plug for AHCA and for the Ambassadors Group. I think that it's going to be really, really important. Yeah. What AHCA has done for us during this pandemic has been incredible. They have really been there for us, and really you guys stepped up so amazingly and really made sure that we survived through this pandemic. And really the Ambassadors Group also did an incredible job of really, again, mobilizing individuals, getting the word out there, and really helping with some of the initiatives that AHCA had on the table. And I really want to say that if anybody hasn't done it yet, like my father said last time I was up there, shame on you. You should really get involved with your organizations and your associations. And if you can, get involved with the Ambassador Group as well. It is meaningful. It is really meaningful and will make an impact.
Thank you, David. Harry, closing thoughts?
So ditto on David's comments, and I would just say thank you to all of you, and thank you to all of you for letting the rookie tag along.
Yes. Cliff, closing thoughts?
Yeah, I'd agree. I want to say, one, thanks to the Ambassador Group. Thank God we connected in 2019. So we had this initial discussion of kind of coordinating our efforts before this crisis hit, and then the crisis hit. And thank God we did. We were prescient in anticipating that. I'm lying. We didn't. We had no clue. But I think, again, I can't understate the impact that I've had just being here as it relates to this is what community looks like.
Yep.
And, you know, I admire it. I'm going to be very honest.
Appreciate that.
I very much
I think
admire
everybody
it.
appreciates that.
I
Everybody
very much
appreciates
admire
you guys.
it. And we can use it. We can use it to our benefit.
All right. Well, a couple quick housekeeping items just before we close out here. Number one, as we said at the top, JJ is available. If anybody really wants to understand how to get involved, please talk to him, meet with the team. Number two, Hershey, I mean, appreciated the moving the session to day 2, but I think after last night's keynote speech at the dinner, we got to do changing the narratives on day 1. And number 3, for everybody else here, take the time. I know we said we're going to answer questions. We're available. If anybody's got anything to talk about, or anyone wants any questions answered, we're free and available. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time, everyone.
Thank you so much.